For about 50 years, you could walk onto a piece of land in central Texas, hand over $25, and dig up whatever you liked. Bring your own shovel. Keep what you find. People did. Weekend after weekend for decades, artifacts went out of that field in buckets and coffee cans and the backs of cars. Nobody involved had any idea that a few feet under those shovels was a layer of stone tools unlike anything else ever found on this continent. Not older versions of something familiar, something with no relatives at all. The place is near a town called Florence, about 50 miles north of Austin. 30 acres of pasture and woodland along a small creek in a shallow valley. It takes its name from Henry Gault, who owned it around the turn of the century. In the 1940s, he sold to the Lindsay family, and it was the Lindsay's who turned it into a pay-to-dig. If you have not come across one of those, it is a simple business. You own land that is rocky and awkward to farm, but full of interesting things. So you charge people to come and look. There are gem mining operations in the American West that work exactly this way, and fossil quarries you can book a day at right now. Nobody is doing anything wrong. Nobody is breaking a law. It just happened that this particular field was one of the richest archaeological sites in North America, and for half a century it was being emptied at $25 a head. And then in 1991, one of the diggers found something he could not identify. They were stones with fine geometric crosshatching cut into their surfaces. Not arrowheads, not tools of any obvious kind. Deliberate patterns etched into rock by somebody. Word travelled from the collector down to the University of Texas, where an archaeologist named Michael Collins was Associate Director of the Texas Archaeological Research Laboratory. Collins got in a car and drove north to look. What he found on that property were more engraved stones and a spear point that he recognised immediately as Clovis, the distinctive fluted point that for most of a century marked the accepted beginning of human life in the Americas. He later described it as one of the biggest nests of Clovis artefacts he had ever seen. His word was flabbergasted. So the good news was that Collins now knew precisely what that field was. The bad news covered everything else. It was private property, it was an active commercial dig, and it was not his. Knowing what a place is turns out to be the easy half of the problem. He would spend the next 16 years on the other half. The pay-to-dig eventually wound down as the land changed hands. When the new owners turned up mammoth bones on their own property, Collins got another phone call. In 1998, he talked them into a 3-year lease and ran a serious excavation. It produced more Clovis material and established that people had used that creek bank continuously for thousands of years. Then the lease ran out, so he filled the hole back in. A meters deep excavation, carefully backfilled by a man who knew exactly what was still underneath it, and then he drove home. I think we need to pause on that image because it breaks the usual mould of how these stories play out. There is no villain in it. Nobody suppressed anything. Nobody called him a crank. A lease simply expired, the way leases do. And the most important site in Texas went back to being a field. 9 more years passed. In 2007, Michael Collins and his wife Karen bought the 30 acres with their own money. Not university money, not grant money. Sources describe it as coming at great personal cost, and then they gave it away immediately. They handed the property to a non-profit called the Archaeological Conservancy so that it could never be sold off, dug up for sport, or built on. Collins founded the Gault School of Archaeological Research to run the work. 16 years from the phone call to the deed. He bought a field so that nobody could ever sell it in pieces, and then made sure he did not own it either, which finally let him do the thing he had been waiting the whole time to do, which was keep digging. And to understand why he kept digging, you need one piece of his history. Back in the 1980s, Collins had worked at Monteverde in southern Chile. Monteverde is the site that eventually broke the Clovis first model, and Collins had been there, in the dirt, and he had come away believing the dates were right. So when the Gault excavation worked its way down through the Clovis layer and hit what looked like a layer of empty clay underneath, he did not stop. That matters more than it sounds. That empty clay is where the entire discipline had been stopping for decades. It was the floor. Below Clovis there was supposed to be nothing, so there was no reason to dig and no funding to dig through soil. Everyone already knew was sterile. Excavation at Gault has now covered 15 separate areas. What really reframes everything is the density of what was left behind. 3% has produced 2.6 million artefacts, not 300, not 3,000, 2.6 million objects out of 3% of 30 acres. In 2002, work began in a section called Area 15, and it is Area 15 that gives this video its title. Beneath the Clovis material, the team recovered around 150,000 artefacts. Bifaces, blade cores, gravers, end scrapers, modified flakes, and 10 projectile points. Alongside the older than Clovis material at the site were the remains of extinct Ice Age animals, horse and mammoth, and at one point they uncovered a human-made surface that appears to be the floor of a structure at least 15,000 years old. The dating was done by optically stimulated luminescence, which measures the last time a grain of sediment saw daylight. The mean age for what they now call the Gault Assemblage came out at 18,500 years, give or take 1,500, with the full range running from about 16,000 to 20,000. The results were published in the journal Science Advances in 2018. But the age is not the remarkable part. Thomas Williams, who led that paper, put it as plainly as a scientist can. The Gault projectile points are unique. Nothing else like them has been found. The paper itself says the assemblage is unlike anything in the early archaeological record of the Americas. Read that carefully because it is easy to skim past. This is not a claim that the tools are older than Clovis. It is a claim that they do not resemble Clovis, or the Western stem tradition, or anything else anybody has dug up anywhere in North or South America, which leaves archaeology in an awkward position, and the awkwardness is visible in the name. They call it the Gault Assemblage. An assemblage in this context is essentially a collection of things found together that nobody can classify. It is the professional way of saying we have no idea what this is. There are people under that creek bank whose culture does not have a name. Now the part where I hand the septics their turn, because they have a real point. The luminescence dates scatter more than anyone would like. The published range runs from about 16,700 at one end to 21,700 at the other, and the sample taken highest in the sequence came back older than two of the samples below it. That is not what a clean stratigraphy looks like. One reviewer summed it up as dates that are good, but not exactly great. There was also a strange silence in the literature. Roughly a mile away on the same creek sits the Friedkin site, with its own pre-Clovis material, dated by Michael Waters in 2011. The obvious thing to do is compare the two assemblages directly. As far as I can tell, nobody has published that comparison. 4 human teeth have come out of Gault, no bones, no burials. What happened next is the last thing you'd expect from a breakthrough excavation. They stopped. After cataloguing that 3%, they filled the excavation back in, deliberately. The reasoning was that 97% of the site is still down there, and the archaeologists of 40 years from now will have methods that nobody in this decade can imagine, and it would be a waste to spend the evidence now. Today there are no open excavations on the property and no digs planned. If you visit, you look at a grassy floodplain, so that is the arc of one field in central Texas. For 50 years, people paid $25 a day to take pieces of it away as fast as they could carry them. Today it belongs to a non-profit, it sits covered over, and the people with every right to dig it are choosing not to. The oldest thing anybody has found, there has no name, no known relatives, and nobody alive who can claim it. It is going to stay in the ground until someone deserves it. I do not really have an ending for this one because it has not happened yet. The rest of that field gets opened when somebody builds a tool that deserves it, and I would like to be around when they do. Subscribe and I will tell you when. Thanks for watching.